Hello there, storytellers and dreamers. My name is Michael, and continuing the Roleplay 101 series I started last week, it's time to go deeper into the rules of role-playing in video games. Last week I talked about exactly what RPGs are and how they were created. The rules differ from type to type, but I will concentrate myself on the two main forms we see in video media, the single-player RPG and the MMO RPG. First, let's set the difference between the two so that we can easily define the particular rules of each. I will start with the single-player games because of the ease and the rather short set of rules. Role-playing in single-player RPGs. First, let's recap the definition of the single-player RPG. Single-player role-playing video games form a loosely defined genre of computer and console games with origins in role-playing games such as Dungeons & Dragons, on which they base much of their terminology, settings, and game mechanics. This translation changes the experience of the game, providing a visual representation of the world but emphasizing statistical character development over collaborative, interactive storytelling. With that out of the way, let's cover the role-playing rules. First rule, it's a single-player game, so it mainly focuses on your character and its own progress into the game, statistically and story-wise. So, mainly, it's all going to be about your character and that's it. The rest of the characters will be generated by the game developers, usually in companions and stuff like that. NPCs, non-playable characters. Alright. Second rule, pay attention to the lore of the game, its entire world building, setting and history. Now this is a general rule in role-playing. You need to pay a lot of attention to the lore, to the history, to what happened before your character came to be, what will probably happen after your character has done what he has done along the story. And also pay attention to important and notable other characters that might have taken a role into the whole process. For example, in Skyrim, you can roleplay as mainly anything you want, but to fully achieve roleplaying, you should also take into consideration what your other characters have done in previous installments of the franchise. As in what your Oblivion character has done, what your Morrowind character has done. If he has done anything notable, then you could include that into your role-playing. So yeah, you get the main point. Okay, so rule number 3. This is not a rule in general, it's more like a recommendation or an opportunity. You can summarize your stories easily in different forms of fanfiction, like diaries or just regular narrative-built stories. Now, this is not a rule, but usually, if you want to roleplay correctly, you would think that your character has a diary or takes notes about his progress into the story. Perhaps not, depends on how you build your character, but usually there are such things as diaries and narrative-built stories. Those usually are built by you. You can write them and publish them on the internet, or just keep them for yourself. It's also part of the role-playing process, and it's a big part of single-player role-playing, because there's no one there to develop that story with. There's no other player to interact with and make the story different from his perspective. So yeah, anyway. People usually do not call this process role-playing, since you are doing everything on your own, and the entire point of it is to make your character fit in the world mainly for your own pleasure. This process is mainly immersion and not actual role-playing. Role-playing usually happens between a group of people as demonstrated by the very famous tabletop RPG Dungeons & Dragons. In Dungeons & Dragons, the main idea was of collaborative storytelling. Of a bunch of people, well, not a bunch, but a group of people gathering together and creating a story from just generic information about races, history, and such things. They would create a world, they would build land masses, and create a saga or a story or an entire campaign of many stories gathered together to form one big storyline. And that was the thing that meant role-playing back in the day. And yeah, that's pretty much it, honestly. That's why role-playing in single-player games cannot be considered role-playing, so to speak. It's more like immersion. Okay, so the conclusion to this entire section of the video would be, do it for your own pleasure and for your own feeling of immersion. If you are into fanfiction or you like that kind of stuff, you can also go ahead and write your own fanfiction, publish it on the internet as I do, or whatever. It is a role-playing game, so you are practically already role-playing, based on the fact that the game is based on the game mechanics and statistical stuff that Dungeons & Dragons and other RPGs before it were based on. And immersion is only a further enhancement of your RPG experience. So it's not role-playing all in itself. Now with that covered, let's talk about the juicy stuff, the MMO RPG, where role-playing is actually a functional part in the in-game player-based society and a part of the community. Role-playing in MMORPGs is a lot more complicated and will be analyzed more in-depth in future installments of the series, as I will cover every single aspect that is contained in the game and is important for a correct and fulfilling roleplay experience. For now, I will give you the basic set of rules, the common rules of roleplaying, if you wish. First rule in roleplaying is, do not Godmode. Godmodding is when a character features godlike abilities such as invincibility or mind control or other unrealistic powers that don't fit in with the lore. It's also considered godmodding to refuse death in fights or ignore roleplayers in scenarios in which said roleplayers are attempting to attack you. Nobody's good at everything. Try to keep yourself in check. So it's pretty obvious what that is, and I'm not gonna sit down and explain to you why godmodding is bad. The definition of it should be enough. Second rule of role-playing, do not overpower yourself or others. What being overpowered is more or less what it sounds like, giving something or someone an unreasonable, unfair, unrealistic, or unbalanced amount of power, especially when it interferes with the ability of players around you to have fun. This can apply in the obvious ways, like having a character who is invincible or can summon the wrath of a zombie army with a flick of his fingers. But it can also be more subtle. For example, a character who is physically average but has a skill mastery of over 70% of all main skills with ease can also be overpowered. However, this can also mean that it's not necessarily overpowered, but it can be difficult to beat, difficult to defeat him. So yeah, you can put a damper on the ability of those around him to create engaging and challenging roleplay scenarios. So you can use these things, but you should be really careful when overpowering someone, because it can get pretty bad. Third rule of roleplay. Do not metagame. Metagaming is when a player applies OOC retrieved information to their IC character, such as participating in a war that you only saw was stated to be happening on a clan's thread on the forums, or hearing whispering because you saw the text and knowing a character's name because you saw their username. This is the most commonly broken rule of roleplay and the most infuriating for many. Now, in order to fully understand this rule, you must understand what IC and OOC means. OOC means out of character, as in the player who has created and developed this character. IC means in character, as in the character that you created, the way he talks, the way he acts, and the way he thinks. When you do this, when you metagame, you apply information that you know only as the player to your character, as if the character had already known these informations, but they couldn't have had any knowledge of these informations. Okay, so you don't name somebody just because you know their name for seeing them. You need to ask them for their names and, do all that social interaction, which you do in real life. It's not like in real life you're going into a pub and there's going to be a floating name tag above each and every individual in that room. Okay? So that is metagaming. Fourth rule of roleplay is do not mix IC and OOC. Related to metagaming, it is considered taboo to mix IC and OOC. That is, players are generally encouraged not to associate informations and events that occurred between active playing characters and events that occur between the role players themselves. Most often, when players associate OOC information with their IC behavior, whether it be how they perceive another character or actually acting on information they wouldn't otherwise have, it's called metagaming. However, it's also considered poor form to take IC information and apply it OOC. That is, if character A insults character B and player B takes character A's insult as a personal attack from player A rather than exclusively an IC attack on character B, that is mixing IC and OOC. Any distance of holding against a player what her character said or did violates this rule. Not to be confused with holding against the player any rule violations he made while controlling his character. Another instance, which is less inflammatory but still technically a violation of this rule, is if character A says something character B doesn't understand or takes it the wrong way, and player A deigns to explain himself OOC to character B. This is especially the case when player B already understood but was intentionally allowing his character to misreact for the sake of adding interest to the game or being true to character B's nature. This cramps the flow of roleplay and can sometimes be insulting to a player, since it suggests that player B's character is a Mary Sue, who player B can separate himself from. Rule number 5. Do not auto-hit, auto-walk, etc. Auto-hitting is when a player performs an action without giving the affected players a chance to respond. For example, running up to somebody and saying, quote, stabs in the heart, end quote, then running off would be considered auto-hitting. Auto also applies to non-combative actions to which another player might have a reaction. Saying the Black Knight slips past the guards and into the castle, while White Knights are guarding the entrance to the White Knight's castle, would be auto-walking on the premise that, in all likelihood, those knights would stop you before you got past them. This can easily be fixed with a simple rewarding. Add tries to and attempts to clarify that your character intends to perform said action, but his success depends on the responses of those around him. More advanced role players will go into detail with their actions and emphasize their attempts. This is a frequently broken rule by newer role players.
Rule number 6. Do not lore break. Lore breaking is when a character breaks lore, which is anything that likely affects a character or scenario. The basis for these commonalities is origin, culture, and known historical events. For example, a vampire that is unaffected when crossing the Holy Solve barrier is a lore break because vampires are weakened outside of Mauritania, where the sun shines. If you don't get that reference, it is from Runescape, which is a rather popular MMO still, although not that many people still play it, but it's still out there. If you want to check it out, I will put the link in the description below. Anyway, lore bending is a similar term, is when existing lore is slightly modified, hence the term lore bending, but not significantly or detracts from the role-playing experience. Often, this has to do with ideas that are neither supported nor contradicted by existing lore. For example, one never comes across a goblin who excels with traditional magic in-game, but it is never explicitly stated that this can't never be done, only that you rarely come across it. Also, this is a reference from the game RuneScape, I'm gonna talk about RuneScape right at the end of this video, okay? Okay. Rule number 7. Do not bloody lore break. That's right, it's on here twice. Avoid it, like seriously. If you're gonna play the game and you're gonna roleplay a character, do the work of creating a fictional character that you're gonna roleplay as in a video, in an MMO. You gotta make sure that the backstory fits, the way you do things fits, and also that you know the history and origins of all these different things in the world, so that you don't come like a stupid person in front of so many people. Alright? Okay. Rule number 8. Do not power play. Power playing occurs when a player operates someone else's character without the other player's consent. The most blatant example of this would be a player writing, "Your character falls off the cliff" when he walks up to it. As you can see, you take active control of what the other character does. Not only is this not fair to the other player, but it's also discouraged because often players will misconstrue the behaviors and personalities of characters they didn't design. Power playing goes into more subtle situations, however. Saying Sally charges Jack so fast that he wouldn't be able to react enough to avoid it, would be quick enough to avoid it. I don't know what the hell is here, I'll have to rewrite that. Okay, can also be considered a violation of this rule, since Sally's player has controlled Jack's abilities, possibly in a way that doesn't accurately represent his character. The appropriate way to word Sally's attack would be, Sally charges Jack so fast that it's unlikely he could totally dodge it without equally inhuman speed. This leaves it up to Jack's player whether or not Jack is actually capable of avoiding Sally. You know, it's a bit weird with all these names, but they're just examples. Okay, so let's jump to the next rule. Rule number 9. Do not play Mary Sue's. I've talked about this earlier in the video, and now I'm going to explain you exactly what a Mary Sue is. A Mary Sue is a specific kind of character that is usually considered literarily reprehensible and otherwise unpleasant for others to play alongside. A Mary Sue is any character of any gender, age, race, or species who fits one or more of these descriptions. Description number 1. A character who's too perfect, lacking realistic or logical flaws, or whose flaws do not affect them in any real ways. A character who's exactly like their creator, except idealized or made better. Example, more attractive, smarter, given skills, abilities, and powers the creator wishes they could have. Essentially, the creator is inserting themselves into the story, but without the flaws, quirks, and limits that make them interesting and real. Users are often discouraged from creating characters who would be described as "he's based off me", especially since that comes with the extra risk of violating the avoid mixing and IC and OOC rule. A character who's far too powerful, especially for whose abilities exceed that which is possible for his/her race in the setting of the story, particularly if said character has abilities that do not exist within the boundaries of the story's world. Often these characters are technically legitimate, but are very "look at how unique and cool I am" type of characters. A character who's cliched, having qualities or characteristics that are overused by people trying to have a powerful, perfect, or cool character. This includes, but is not limited to, the traits listed as popular roleplay trends. This is like a common thing. It's these popular roleplay trends are types of characters or types of characteristics for characters that are overused, and you should not delve into that shit. Alright, so that would be all the rules that you need to know. Therefore, this collection of rules has been built by the Runescape community. I think I've said that previously in the video, if I'm not wrong. One of the oldest MMOs that are still being played, and one of the classics of the MMO genre. Through the years, not much has changed, except for some particularities that each game and each guild of RPers has, and I'm talking here about the role-playing world,
Specifically, not about the games themselves, because the MMO genre has evolved and has mixed itself with other genres of the gaming community. So, yeah. But RuneScape is one of the oldest and still played MMOs. Anyway, this has been basically everything. If you do respect these rules, everything will end up fine. Okay, so you just pay attention to these rules, try to respect them as much as you can. Mistakes will be made. That happens always with new RPers. So don't be scared to make mistakes. Just make sure they're not too big, please. Okay? Okay. Anyway, this has been all from me for this episode of Roleplay 101. A much delayed video, I know. And in the following, I will tell you what's gonna come up next in the next episode. In the next episode, I will be talking about how to get started with RPing, about forums, about different games, and where to find them. Different RP communities, and where to find them. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. I've been Michael from Sagas and Stories. Go check out the other channels that are affiliated with the Ember community. Go connect with us on Discord and on the forums. Links are always in the description below. Go check out my channel. Go subscribe for my type of content. If you're liking my content, go check it out. It's great. Don't forget to click the little bell thing near the subscribe button on this channel to get notified whenever anything that the community posts is up. And go check out my blog where I post our articles about everything I do, including Roleplay 101. There you can find all the rules listed, easy for you to read in case you forget them. Hope it was helpful for you, and I hope that the next episode will be just as helpful, and if not more. So that's it for me. Don't forget to write your stories in the annals of the internet and keep on dreaming. Goodbye.